Good morning, everybody. This is Jeannie Lee who's filling in for us, and that was so beautiful, Jeannie. Thank you so much. I'm Jules Taylor, and I am a member of the Chalice team as well as the choir, and I'm so happy to get to welcome you this morning here. Unitarian Universalism is a liberal religious tradition. We uphold the interconnectedness of all beings. We value equality, justice, inclusion, and peace, and each other. And wherever you are on your spiritual path, in whatever means that you are taking to get there, we're glad that you're here. And you're welcome and supported. If you are new to our fellowship, there are some new some cards to fill out if you would like, so we can keep in touch with you. That would be so great, in the seat in front of you. And later on in the service, we'll do some joys and concerns where we share joys or concerns with each other, and you can fill out this yellow card in the seat in front of you. You can indicate whether you would like it shared or not aloud. And if you're joining us on Facebook, thank you so much. And if you want to go ahead and type in your joys and concerns, that would be great, and we'll read them when we get there. Thank you. If anybody needs any hearing assistance, David back here, who is our technical director, he will help you out, so just see David. Children are always welcome here, for sure. Thank you so much for bringing children. But we also have an awesome nursery downstairs, and Alex works in the nursery. She's fabulous. And lastly, of course, please do silence phones and all other devices. Thank you.
We have so many talented members in this congregation. Some of them are hidden treasures. And one of those is Dr. Jeff Nash. He doesn't require us to call him doctor, but he's earned it. You may know also his slightly more outgoing partner, Dinah Nash. But Jeff and Dinah are a power couple, I would say. They've been here about 3 years at UUFF. Prior to that, we're in Little Rock at UUCLR there. And what you may not know, what I didn't know at first about Jeff, is that he is a retired professor of sociology. I think twice retired. He tried to retire once and then ended up teaching at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. But prior to that, taught at Missouri State University, University of Tulsa, Macalester College. He has written articles and books on a variety of topics. And today he will be talking to us about religion. What's happening with religion in the United States? There's some major changes taking place. And what does it mean for us? So look forward to that. He selected our reading for today, Be Ours a Religion by Theodore Parker. The words will be up on the screen and just, well, there they are, magically appearing. I did want to say that Theodore Parker, some of you recognize that name, but he was a Unitarian minister about 200 years ago in Boston. Even for a Unitarian, he was considered a bit heretical because he was also a transcendentalist. That is, he thought nature had more to tell us about the divine than any holy books did. Also, he was a radical abolitionist. And also heretical, he thought women should be treated completely equal to men. And here is what he wrote almost 200 years ago, these words: "Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Its profession of faith, divine living." And now Fawn will light the chalice for us.
Good morning, all. I'm Fawn, your administrator. If you would like, please say these words with me as we light the chalice. Love is the spirit of this Trinity, and service is its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and truth, and to help one another. Thus do we covenant together.
Good morning, y'all. Would you stand as you're able? We are going to sing Come, Come, Whoever You Are. The first time, Jeannie is going to play it through by herself, and then we are going to sing it in unison. And then we're going to try around. And we're going to sing it twice in a round. And Ollie is going to lead these beautiful people, and I'll lead this side. Okay, so the first time, just listen, and then just watch Ollie and I, and we'll show you what to do next. All together. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Now we're going to do it twice in a round. We're going to go first, and then Ollie. Ready? Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. One more time. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Lovely. Thank you. Please be seated.
And now, friends, we would like to offer our joys and concerns. So if you have yellow cards that you'd like to bring up, you can give those to me. If you would like to just raise them up, someone will come pick them up. And also, we're going to drop a stone into the water to signify the ripples that all of us are part of. And it's wonderful to get to share this with y'all right now. And so, as you would like, please proceed right up to here. Thank you. Anything else, Carol? Okay, thank you so much. And Stephanie, if you would also drop a rock for all of the joys and concerns that we're holding in our hearts that we haven't expressed. And let's take a few moments of silence to just hold those and hold the space for those and think about that. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, now we're going to do the offering section of the service. And if you are in a position or feel comfortable giving financially, that's fantastic, and thank you so much. But also please know that your gift of your presence here today is so beautiful and important and part of this fellowship, as well as all of your gifts of time and talent as we move forward. You can also, if you feel more comfortable, there's also, of course, you can give online at uufayetteville.org. Thank you. Please welcome Jeff.
For those of you who regularly attend mindful discussions, you're excused. This will be a very similar, although I'll try to change it up a little bit. I want to try to talk about how the discipline of sociology can change the way we look at religion and help us understand what kind of transformations are taking place today in the U.S. religious landscape. We've all seen a map like this. This is sort of an illustration. This one's kind of fuzzy. It has nothing to do with the point I want to make. It just has to do with being cheap. Didn't want to buy one that would be clear. But we've all seen this. And when we look at it, we know there are 5 continents and all this sort of stuff. It's just everyday, it's part of what we call in sociology everyday knowledge that's taken for granted. However, as we all know, with the development of plate tectonics in the latter part of the 20th century, we discovered that all of this diversity, these 5 continents were actually one continent, 200 million years ago, and geologists have called it Pangea. And once you recognize that, you can see how they actually fit together. It's obvious, isn't it? That you can see that Africa goes over here with South America, and Europe goes over here, and Cuba and the Bahamas, they all broke off when the plates collided. And so there's never any way that we can look at that map again in the same way. I want to suggest that sociology offers a kind of equivalent of this kind of change of perspective. And it starts with Emil Durkheim, who was a founding person of the discipline of sociology, wrote mostly at the end of the 19th century and into the early 20th century, died a very sad man. He had some optimistic expectations about what the future was going to be like, but his son was killed in World War I, and he was stricken with grief. But before he contributed a lot to us. His literature, his books really didn't become available to Americans till probably in the 1930s, 1940s. Everything pretty much had been translated, and Americans could see it. He tried to show, through analysis of primitive, we don't use that term anymore, but he did then, and he looked at aboriginals in in Australia, and noticed this very strong connection between the way that they lived, how they survived, what things were of danger to them, what places helped them to survive, how they reinforced each other. And he discovered this connection between religion, religious beliefs, ways of transcending everyday life, and the way they lived. So what he actually said was that in traditional religion, certainly in Christianity, we make the assumption that man was created in the image of God. And Durkheim's analysis turns that on its head and says just the opposite, that God is created in the image of man. In other words, that we can only understand the mysteries of the universe in terms of what we know now. So what that suggests is that there are contributions that religion makes, regardless of what kind of religion it is, and he tried to identify those. He called them functions. They give meaning and purpose to life, reinforce social unity and stability, serve as an agent of social control for behavior, promote physical and psychological well-being, and motivate people to work in for positive social change. Not all of these things work equally at the same time, and the content of them are reflections of the nature of the society in which they reign. Let me see. Here's a simple little chart that kind of explains, hopefully, what he's trying to say. If you think about the history of humankind, we sort of all know that we were originally hunters and gatherers. Anthropologists tell us that we came out of Africa and went in 3 different ways, and some ended up in Europe, and some went all the way to South America. Can actually trace down the coast, and along the way, people had to make sense of what they were doing, and they made sense of what they were doing in terms of what they thought they knew or what they knew. When we were hunters and gatherers, we had a rather simple division of labor. And that produced, and in order to keep that simple division of labor, you can't have people doing each other's work. That's that kind of idea. So you can't decide, geez, I don't want to be here in the front anymore. I really like it better in the back, and I don't want the spear, I want the net. Well, that makes no sense in that kind of society, right? You don't get that choice. This is just the way it is. And if you don't do it, there are strong sanctions against you. Their religions in this type of society tend to be animistic. They tend to worship nature. They tend to have images of evil that are based upon the scariest animals that you can think of. In our own society, while today, we think of retreating into the forest as a wonderful thing of relaxation, and we've even discovered chemicals there that make us feel good. That took a long from the trees. And that took a long time for human beings to not be afraid of the forest. We still have some of that, right? And so instead of some place of worship and serenity, the forest was a place of danger, right? And you had to be on alert all the time. So you can worship those things. The second stage was sedentism, or it's basically when people stopped moving around so much and stayed in one place. And that was basically agricultural, but it was also the rise of trade cities, where people began to deal with folks of different religions, people coming in with very different ideas, and they began to talk to each other and realize that the ideas of religion didn't fit together very well, and so there was a press towards theism. And not all religions were theists, but the theistic views began to dominate because the societies became more sedentary. Modern societies, and we'll talk about that a little bit when that occurs, have incredibly complex and interdependent divisions of labor. If you look at the U.S. Labor statistics about different kinds of occupations that exist in the United States, the book is that thick. There are all kinds of things that they're similar. Most of them involve selling something, but they are numerous. Then we have weak norms, or at least indirect norms. One of the examples that I like to use about indirect norms is our criminal justice system, which is organized in such a way that you can commit the same crime over and over, and you think you've gotten away with it, and then when you get caught, the punishment is massive. Any psychologist knows that that's a terrible way to condition a rat, right? You get really bad reactions if you do that. But we have this indirect, and the idea is that this was when individualistic religions began to appear. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about Protestantism. And then the postmodern era, and there's all kinds of discussion about when the postmodern started and what it is. Most people think it started after World War II, when society began to change rapidly, when technology, most of which came out of World War II, began to bombard us with all kinds of toasters and dishwashers and electric ironing boards and now computers and all this stuff. We're just constantly bombarded with this, it's almost like a spewing, of technology. And that has resulted in weak and even anomic norms. And anomy is a term that was coined by Durkheim, and it means normlessness. There are no norms. And of course, each time we get a new technology, we go through this because we don't know how to use them, right? And so we have to develop rules of etiquette. So we tell people to silence their cell phones, right? And presumably at some point we won't have to tell people that anymore, but now it seems to be necessary, right? And that's what's meant by anomy. Okay, Marx, pretty much in a very similar vein, but precursor to Durkheim, felt that religion was just a part of every other institutional part of society, and that each of those institutions were subservient to the mode of production. So the famous quote, is that religion is the opium of the people. It's the sign of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. And that was in his critique of Hegel's philosophy. The result, he thought, was what he called false consciousness, and by that he meant where people do, because of religion, they do not realize their own interests, and they therefore do all kinds of things that aren't in their interests. It's the kind of what's the matter with Kansas idea, right? And that was the part. So religion is just subservient to the major parts and most important parts of society. Max Weber, who was a German sociologist, said, wait a minute, religion is a powerful force in society, and there are times and historical conditions under which religion can actually change something so rational as the economic system of exchange. And this is his famous hypothesis called the Protestant ethic in the spirit of capitalism. And it's important because it helps us to understand part of what's happening in contemporary religion today. His idea was that two historical trends that basically had very little to do with each other collided, which is a way of putting it. The Protestant Reformation, and scholars have written tomes on this. We know that the Protestant Reformation started, as a reaction to Catholicism. When Luther tacked his theses on the door, he couldn't have imagined what was happening, what would happen after that. He was, after all, a Catholic, right? It's hard to imagine all the wars and everything else that happened from that. But nevertheless, this was taking place, a sort of falling apart or disintegration of the Holy Roman Empire. When the church was society, was law, was ethics. And at the same time, this thing called capitalism was developing, and there are many forms of capitalism. There, in the early forms, there's a mercantile capitalism, there's a trade kind of capitalism, and they really didn't have much to do with religion because they existed. These forms of capitalism existed in societies with very different kinds of religion. But Weber argued that they came together, particularly in Europe and in the United States, in a way that created the Protestant ethic. And that ethic, once it developed, stayed with us. And boy, is it ever with us today. And we can talk about examples. Where did it come from? Well, Weber said, here's the way you can understand this. Do a mental experiment. And the mental experiment is that you're not a Catholic. And you know that if you're not a Catholic, you're damned. Right? This is in the early days of Protestant Reformation. There were huge battles that took place. Nasty things happened. Bill told us about some of those in an earlier presentation. So what do? Well, the doctrine of predestination came up as a part of it. Really, if God's omniscient, then he knows what decision I'm going to make in the first place, so why should I even bother about it? So I tell you what, if I'm one of the elect, I'm just going to have a gay old time and do whatever I want. Live life broadly, big. And of course, how does that look to other people who believe like you? Well, you couldn't be one of the elect if you actually lived that. What if I could just wait to die and I'm not going to do anything in the world? And that would be, oh, you mean you're a monk? That's not good either, because that doesn't. So how do you impress others that you are a Christian and that you're going to heaven? You do good works, right? And you do as many good works as you can again and again, and you become the hardest worker you can imagine. And that your tasks are Jesus' tasks, they're God's tasks, and you need to work hard at it. Weber said the religious part of that faded away, and what we were left with is just work hard. And work hard produced the spirit of capitalism, which we live with today. Weber thought that happened in Europe. It did happen in Europe, but it also spread around the world. And so if you apply for a job today, one of the first things they ask you is, are you a hard worker? I always had trouble with that. I hope I'm a smart worker. I don't want to work so hard that I make myself sick. You know, I don't want to accumulate so much wealth that I don't know what to do with it. What motivates people to do that? And of course, today we have many, many examples of the super wealthy people who seem to be accumulating wealth for its own sake, just so they have more money than the next person. And that's the spirit of capitalism. And of course, we see that in this prosperity Christianity. We all know about that, has emerged, so that people assume that if they live their lives as Christians and they go to Christ for financial advice through his representatives, you know, who set up businesses to help you do that, that you will prosper, right? And that's what God wants for you. Make as much money as possible, right? Okay, so that's the contribution. There we go. All right. At the same time that Protestantism is taking place and that the capitalism is developing into its contemporary forms, we have this phenomena that sociologists call secularization. And what they mean by secularization, or what we mean by secularization, is that the world becomes demystified. You know, where we used to think when lightning struck it was Thor, and we had this wonderfully enchanted story that we could tell, you know, about why lightning was striking and what the thunder means. And geez, really, yeah, this, no, it's a low pressure that's moving in from the southwest, and there's a heat dome over here, and there, you know, there are arrows and things circle, and it's really boring, right? The world becomes disenchanted. And more secularization just creeps in, and it's taking over almost all of the way we think about the world. And much of it is the common sense understanding of science. You know, so we take what we learn from science and then we make it a part of the way that we see the world. And of course, this secularization is, in conflict with certain belief systems. So the question is, what's happening? How far has secularization gone? Just a couple of charts to show what's going on. This is a recent chart from the Gallup poll, which shows the rise of what are sometimes called nuns, right? People who claim no religion at all. And you can see that from 1950, this is a dramatic increase, you know, from basically 2 or 3% all the way up to 21%. This is a really interesting chart. I want to have to explain it a little bit. This is called the Great Decline, which is 60 years of religion in America. Sociologists and other social scientists like to quantify things, right? They like to put a number on something that they're studying. And so sociologists and others have developed a religiosity index. And it's a number, you know, which is the result of adding up the results of a bunch of questions that people are asked. And they're basically the 3 B's, you know, belonging, behavior, and beliefs. So you ask people about, do you belong to a church? You know, are you a deacon? You know, are you in the hierarchy of the church? How much, what is your membership? And then the behavior, how often do you go? Do you pray daily? Do you follow rituals? You know, are these religious behaviors a part of your everyday life? And then beliefs, you know, what do you believe? Do you believe in miracles? Do you believe in the virgin birth? And all of those things. And what you can see is that this index has taken a big plunge, right? And it indicates that we're now probably talking about folks who, by and large, are irreligious, you know, from this particular measure. Now, obviously, it varies around the country. You know, you get to have 3 guesses at which state scores high in religiosity. You know, it's Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee are the 4 top ones. The lowest scores on religiosity, you can probably guess that too. You know, Vermont, Connecticut, Oregon, right? And then the other states are sort of somewhere in between. But there's a big difference between Oregon and Arkansas. if you look at these things. Okay, here's another way of looking, and I thought this was pretty interesting, and this gets to specific beliefs, and this is also from Gallup. Do you believe in these things? God, heaven, angels, hell, the devil. And you can see how it's declining over time. But what strikes me is there's still a lot of people who believe in God in some way or another. And that percent's higher depending upon how the question's asked. But here it's 74%. And of course the hell and the devil are lower in the percent of people who believe in it. So the secularization trend is real. It's dominating almost everything that we think about, and more we being citizens of postmodern and modern societies understand the world from a secular point of view. That's when we're diagnosed with cancer, we understand that from the point of view of medical science. We may layer religious beliefs over it, but we basically understand it as an illness, and it's the best that we can absorb what scientists tell us about it. Peter Berger was a contemporary sociologist. Has anybody run into him? Hey, Gene, have you seen his stuff? He was probably the best-known sociologist of religion throughout his career. He died in 2015 and he was at Boston College for a while and had a joint position in the theology school and sociology. And he wrote a book that I read many, many years ago, and when I was preparing this talk, I thought about the book. It's called A Rumor of Angels, and it was published in 1969. And what he tried to do is say, yes, all this secularization is taking place. And yes, sociology is a debunking science, and it makes you really cynical about religion when you study these things. But he clung to the idea that there could still be, as he put it, a rumor of angels. And he set about to try to develop a way that he could think about the possibility of a rumor of angels. And obviously he didn't mean it in the winged creatures. He's talking about a transcendental belief, a way of escaping everyday life. And he thought that any hope of transcending the effects of secularization would have to deal with these three issues. That it would have to have a firm anthropological understanding of human beings. And that means the degree to which we're animals, how much we've learned so much about what we are as humans, especially from evolutionary psychology. And the cognitive scientists, the cognitive science tells you think you remember what happened in the past? Oh, we've distorted our past so much in our little brains, with the way we want to understand things, that it probably has very little to do with what actually happened, right? I had an example of that. I have two friends that I went to elementary school, junior high, and high school with them. Hadn't seen them in years and years. They were Tom and Mike. Dinah got us together. We were going to have lunch. Tom was a football player. He was the king of homecoming, and all. Mike was just my buddy. I meet the two guys and say, "Hey, Tom." He said, "No, I'm Mike." I go, "What happened?" Tom was a little guy, Mike was tall, and we sat around and talked about it, but our memories are awful, right? And so what we think of, when we start talking about religion, we got to have a firm understanding of how the mind works, what kinds of things happen in our brain, how we are disposed to react in certain ways. And it has to also deal with what's empirically given. And what he meant by that is that if you're going to have this transcendental experience with your theology, which is what he's talking about, is that what you have to do is understand what people take as real. We call it the paramount world of everyday life in sociology. It means these are chairs, this is a light, there's electricity that starts it, this is a candle that would hurt if I put my finger in. These are things that we all know and just take for granted that they're real. You know, the reality changes with different societies, but in this one, you know, and there's some things that cut across them. And he said, so it also has to be an inductive faith. And I thought this was an interesting idea. Traditional religion, he thinks, is a deductive faith. In other words, you start from certain principles. You know, that Christ is the Son of God. Right? And these precepts or beliefs, you then deduce your own religious experiences from applying these principles. And he says that a viable religion that allows us to transcend secularization uses the inductive process where we jump to a belief from our own experiences, which is a kind of interesting idea, I think. Okay, so you can expect to hear a rumor of angels as secular and sacred places intersect. People do this constantly in a hospital, and in preparation for this, I watched some short video clips of Berger talking about his ideas. And one of his ideas was to illustrate this point. Look at a modern hospital. You know, a modern hospital is a bastion of secularization. You know, it's a rational organization. It has incredibly complex teams. The treatments that you receive there are all based on the best science available. And we hope that the doctors understand it. You know, we don't want them deciding where to make an incision based on their faith. That doesn't work. You know, you put a little X where you make the decision. And that's because mistakes were made. And by the way, a doctor who had trouble figuring out right and left had to stop and think about it. Some of us have to stop and think which is right, which is left. And he did a study, and he found out about 10% of the population is like that. It's just the way our brains work. Doesn't mean we're dumb or we don't know right or left. We just have to think about it a little bit. And that's when you start getting the X's on the legs and all that sort of thing. But in this house, this secular house, all kinds of religious things take place. Did anybody here, there was an NPR interview with a guy named Joel Rawlings, who is a pediatric surgeon. He operates on fetuses, you know, tiny little things. And he talked about his experiences, and he talked about religion. And he said, I get close to my patients. You know, these are mothers and fathers who are going through these very serious, sometimes they lose the children. And he said, if they want a prayer circle, this is a quote as best I can remember, where he said, if they want a prayer circle, I'll stand in the prayer circle with them. I don't care what religion it is. That's a secular response. That's right. Okay, so that's, you know, I feel like I should ask for questions. But this is kind of, so what we're seeing is a complex interplay of traditional beliefs with the forces of secularization. And it's coming out to be sometimes very unusual results with different kinds of versions of Protestantism, you know, different kinds of versions, and some are reactionary kinds of things. And, you know, much of what we see in so-called growth parts of Christianity, which are the cross churches and those evangelical stuff, and by the way, they're not growing as fast as they would like you to think. Most of the data shows that they're also in this general decline, and they bounce up some too. But all of that is a reaction to living in a world of mutable selves where we reinvent ourselves all the time, and in fluid meanings, which we can attach to all of our various aspects of everyday life. So I would like to quote, or close with a quote from John Lennon. As you remember, he told us that it wasn't hard to imagine no religion. And I would like to close by telling you that from a sociological point of view, it's very hard to imagine no religion.
Okay, I'd like to thank Jeff Nash for our message today. Another round of applause for Jeff. And I'd like to propose that you come back, Jeff, and share with us why you're UU, because I think I'd like to hear from you about that. And I also want to sing a song, and if you're willing to sing with me, stand up. It's called Building a New Way, and I think it's very relevant to what we're doing in terms of religion and spirituality, and just the first song that we sang, which, by the way, was written by the Sufi poet Rumi. Not sure if you're familiar with Rumi, but you're welcome here, whoever you are, and we are building a new way. Your doubts, your journey, your whole self is welcome here. So please join Building a New Way. We're going to sing 4 verses, and then we're going to come back to the first verse at the end. Building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. Thank you. Please be seated.
Please join me as we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Hi, everybody. It's Jules, and I'm going to give you a little bit of the announcements. What a great service. Yeah, great music, really great message. And I was talking to Bill before we started, and just the title of Jeff's message made me think of like a graduate school course. And it was, too. That was great. Thank you so much. So there are a few of announcements on the back of the program that you can see. Just to go through them really quickly, our grounds team meets every Thursday, and thank you to the grounds team because it looks amazing out there. It is beautiful. So please feel free to join that. We also have the justice team meeting coming up, and you can join that on Zoom, and it would be a great one to be part of also. There's a care team meeting, which is a really great ministry to be part of. And something really exciting, and there's a potluck coming up. And that's next Sunday, right? Yeah, next Sunday, after service potluck. That's fun. I would like, lastly, to ask Stephanie's going to come forward and talk to us a little bit about something really, really important happening in our state.
Thanks, Jules. I'm not sure, I bet most people in here are familiar with the LEARNS Act that our governor passed. And there is an organization called CAPES, and it's they have started a petition to get the LEARNS Act up for a vote. It dramatically affects public ed funding in our state, and perhaps you feel the way I do, that public education is good for everybody. And so there is a petition that I have here, one for Washington, one for Benton. If you are interested in signing and you have not already signed, feel free to meet me. I will set up at the picnic table outside, so there's not like a big crowd, but would love your signature. And yeah, the petition is just to get the LEARNS Act up for a vote for the people, because it was passed without our voice, and I think that's important and relevant to our principles. So thanks, Jules.
Thank you.
Yes. The green picnic table outside. Yeah, I know it's hot out there. I just feel like it. Oh, sweet.
Petition.
Gretchen, do you want to meet me out there, or you want to set up somewhere else? Okay. Well, on that note, maybe I'll stay inside too. I'll stay right here. And so you're welcome to either go see Gretchen. Where will you be, Gretchen? Okay. Gretchen over there, Washington County only? Gretchen, you rock. Okay, so take your pick, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks y'all so much for doing that. That's like really important. And if you're not familiar with the LEARNS Act and you're an Arkansan, you have like one day and really look at that. It is like something really important. Yeah, this is it. So if you haven't signed that petition, really, please do. And thanks y'all for doing that work. Appreciate that so much. Thank you, Jeannie Smith, for being here and helping us out. And Jeannie is going to play a little Bach for our postlude. Thank you to everybody for being here and sharing this time. And have a wonderful week.